puppies and kittens, welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible as we plod along on these, doing another special edition show because we had to jumble up our schedules a little bit. Other things were going on this last weekend. And I want to open up today by talking about Lawrence's t-shirt. I want that t-shirt.
Yeah. I don't know where to get them, but I wear it often. It's pretty solid.
A-T blank, 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 M. What's missing? He is.
Yeah, pretty solid. Pretty solid shirt.
And you know the Christians are going to look at it for the first few seconds and just like, oh, isn't that? And like it might take them 20 minutes to clue in.
Yeah, some people do get it faster than others, but I do notice a lot of people analyzing it. Like it's just very often actually trying to decipher.
Brilliant. Well, I'm going to Google that. I'm going to see if I can get it.
Is a gift from a friend of mine who wanted me to bear our feminine rage to the world. So this is the bread.
Show that off and explain it.
Yes, everyone, look at my breasts. This is the don't tread on me snake. I swear there's writing, but you know, perps happen. And you'll notice it is in a form much like a ram's horn of the female reproductive system. We will not be allowing the pro-forced birth agenda any more space.
Yeah. And Mark Peralta, congrats on your wife's performance in the pub the couple nights ago, singing a duet with Shelley Siegel. And you told us something. You're going and recording about that.
So we already did recorded and produced a full Spanish version of the same song. And so now we're just putting in the finishing details with Shelley Siegel so that it can be legally, put out there, right, for people to hear on Spotify, on Amazon Music, and she gets the credit and we get some credit, and it's beautiful. So we're very excited about that. Thank you for sharing.
Collaboration.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that when I was recording that on my phone, I didn't. That turned out to be a lot nicer than I thought. Oh, this is a thing. I wish I turned on my phone just 5 seconds earlier, got the whole thing. I wish, but anyway, you did a good job recording it. And you were in a better position than me anyway. Isaac, Tomer, anybody else got anything to start up before we go?
I think the one thing for me is that I actually have a few things prepared for this one.
Ooh.
Shocker, right? Crazy. I usually go into this blind and see what happens.
Yeah, I also have an introduction to the chapter, but I guess we'll do it after we read.
Is this for chapter 18 or chapter 19? Because we haven't done 18 yet, but 19 is the one where I'm going to become very pleasant.
We haven't even done 17.
I thought we were on 17.
Were we on 17?
We are in 17.
Yeah, 17.
Yes.
17.
Yeah.
Oh, look at me.
Okay, and who's reading today?
I think it should be our returning guest, Mark.
I certainly can.
Start it up.
All right, starting now. Okay. Let me just close some things here to make that more visible. Okay. All right, so starting on Judges 17, verse 1. And I'm reading from the NRSV. There was a man in the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah. He said to his mother, quote, "The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and even spoke it in my hearing, that silver is in my possession. I took it, but now I will return it to you." And his mother said, "May my son be blessed by the Lord." Then he returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother, and his mother said, "I consecrate the silver to the Lord from my hand for my son, to make an idol of cast metal." So when he returned the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave it to the silversmith, who made it into an idol of cast metal. And it was in the house of Mikra. This man Mikra had a shrine, and he made an ephod and a teraphim, and installed one of his sons, who became his priest. In those days, there was no king in Israel. All the people did what was right in their own eyes. Now, there was a young man of Bethlehem in Judah, of the clan of Judah. He was a Levite residing there. This man left the town of Bethlehem in Judah to live wherever he could find a place. He came to the house of Mikra in the hill country of Ephraim to carry on his work. Mikra said to him, "From where do you come?" He replied, "I am a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I am going to live wherever I can find a place." Then Mikra said to him, "Stay with me and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, a set of clothes, and your living." The Levite agreed to stay with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. So Mikra installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and he was in the house of Mikra. Then Mikra said, "Now I know that the Lord will prosper me because the Levite has become my priest."
So, good amount of stuff to cover here. First of all, where the hell did this story even come from?
I know, it's so random. It's just
it's just right there. It almost comes from nowhere, like an RKO. And
it's the setup for the setup for the ending, right?
No, it's a setup for chapter 18. Actually, I mean,
that's the ending that he means. So
it doesn't go further than that?
No, that's not the same Levite as is in the bad chapter.
Yeah.
So there is a so there are a few things that I wanted to kind of note here. So from the actual context of the story, we can tell a few things. So the priesthood is held in pretty high regard still. This was probably at a time of dispersion, since the Levite is coming from Bethlehem. There is this almost acceptance of Yahweh imagery, but it could still be a bad thing considering the idols. Sorry, spoiler alert from the next chapter. For the next chapter, if you haven't read this, it was around for a long time. You had time to read this. So yeah, they get taken in the next.
This is
chapter.
not the new Bridgerton.
Right. Yeah. So they get stolen in the next chapter. So it might not necessarily be taken as like a good thing, right? Because like even though at the end of the chapter he says, "Now I know that the Lord will prosper me because the Levite has become my priest," you could still take it as, well, he didn't really, because your shit got taken. But this might point to a more accepted iconographic practice within the household religious practices. It
does seem probable, like the line is thrown in, and this is bad, kind of, but the tale doesn't betray any kind of knowledge that he should not be making images.
So there is when it comes to Yahweh imagery itself, we have quite a few of them, honestly. Not only do we have the imagery from places like Kuntalet Adrud, but we also have coins from the late Persian period that show imagery of what's most likely Yahweh. There was a coin studied by Edelman, I believe, and it shows an enthroned bearded god, and I think what's written on the coin is Yahud, so it might be identifiable with Yahweh. There's a lot of aniconism within the Bible generally, but there were very clearly some instances in which that didn't apply. So Marcus Smith actually suggested that maybe since some Yahweh imagery was tolerated, it might have been a prohibition of images of other deities, which at least to me would explain all the anti-idol stuff, right? Like, they have ears, but they don't see. Sorry, they don't have ears, but they don't hear. They have eyes, but they don't see. That's funny.
I know. And I mean, it's so silly because people have used icons with an awareness that that's literally not the whole God in my little statue. It's just a memento that possibly has some spiritual significance or connection. But but either way, I think that we need to remember that
the reason why these two chapters are so interesting to me is because it kind of shows this divide what's often been seen as like the difference between official state religion and more like rural popular religion. The divide is we have to remember that this is not monolithic, and
I still maintain that, as we've discussed, the change of the religion over time and the rising of certain cults with certain ideological hard lines changed it over time, and then lots of that group retconned a lot of the rest. So I'm honestly shocked that this story exists, because it just treats the making of an idol to Yahweh like anything. Like that's obviously that's how you consecrate it. Obviously Levites are just wandering around, and if one agrees to be your priest, well, obviously you've been blessed by God, because obviously.
Yeah, there is I do actually have something on that, but when it comes to whether or not this is accepted, think about it this way, right? So we have in the previous chapters with Samson, that dude has the absolute thickest plot armor. God is everywhere, basically pulling all the strings like he's a fucking puppet. And the difference here is that, and even in chapter 18, we're not going to see much of God doing anything. There's going to be one interpretation, but it's not really like an oracle. It's just kind of thought to be an oracle. But there is but either way, we need to remember that we're not looking at a monolith. So even if there was this huge divide between popular religion and state religion, they were just two different philosophies on the same gods. It would have been dynamic and changed according to time and place. And a few of the things that I want to kind of note just around the framing of the story. So the way that the chapter begins, there was a man in the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah. Please recall 13:2. So chapter 13, verse 2. There was a certain man of Zorah of the tribe of the Danites whose name was Manoah. So it has that same kind of beginning to the story. And something
the certain man of Zorah, he's the one with the mask and the sword.
Yes, it's that one. Good job, Arn. You get a cookie. So Micah, and I know that I already know that Tomer's gonna hit on this one. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Hebrew here, at least in the first instance, like throughout the text, it is referred to generally as Micah, but the first instance is Mikayehu. Is that right?
Yes, Michael.
That means who is like Yahweh.
Yes,
which is hilarious considering what he does, right? But the Septuagint it also varies. There's Micah and there's Micaias, but not the biggest difference. Of course, the 11,000 pieces is the amount that was given to Delilah by each of the Philistine lords. So the weird thing about how that story is framed, where did he get all this money? He got it back, right? So there is I read I forget who it was, but I read one commentator that said that he stole it from his own mother. But that was like, wait, that could be interpretation, but he stole it from his own mother.
Yeah, that's what it says.
It's in his possession, and he
his mother.
Now return it to you. But
it's just the way he frames it.
I don't know.
He goes, the money that was taken from you. Like he didn't do it at first.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Then he says, "I took it."
And then
so unless he's saying that he found the robbers.
But that's the other possibility, right? That he found the someone else's stolen.
Yeah, although the stolen interpretation is Russian Kimchi support this, but you have Vaticanus El Vulgate who read which you took for yourself, and I'll get to that.
Whenever I'm in a situation like that, the story is always that I found it.
Yeah, obviously.
I think with the explanation of Rashi is kind of like, or at least according to Steinsaltz, that you lost some money was taken from you, and then you swore an oath saying whoever took it, let them die or whatever. And then he's like, I took it, and then she blesses him to kind of cancel the curse.
Oh,
I stole your money. I will bless you. Okay.
Yeah, but then it is her kid. She has to utter the counter spell, or she'll,
So
really
is that perhaps the author's way of saying, "Hey, this idol is like dirty money"? Or what's the point of that?
Maybe. Yeah. Considering where this goes next, where the idol goes next, potentially.
But we can pay it back by setting up a corporation and then doing reimbursements so that it looks like income.
Man, Arn is thinking way ahead of the times here. This guy's got quite the brain on him.
If you want to start your own religion, I'm perfectly capable of faking prophecy. I had many years in Egypt. We'll just discuss it afterwards. I'll have a revelation and we'll get the tax forms in by next week.
Yeah, we stole all of the silver. How do we launder it? Oh, we'll set up a new religion, make an idol, and then we'll take shavings and say it's coming from the collection pot.
Yeah, but notice like
tax free as well.
It is important to note here, like this is a Levite doing this, right? Who is supposed to, not do exactly this thing, but at least in the framing of the story, it seems like he was perfectly fine with it.
Which is a good time to bring this up. Omega Weapon says, "What's a Levite again?" So I just want to offer it's a brand of trousers traditionally made out of heavy canvas
not that
are dyed indigo.
But we have discussed that the Levites are, spoken of as one of the 12 tribes and one of the sons, yada, yada, yada. But that at some point that may have actually been a religious designation of, the firstborn sons given to the priesthood or whatever. And that was then retconned into a tribe, which is possible, at least in some areas.
Yeah.
And this story gives evidence to that because the Levite comes from Judah. And he comes from Bethlehem in Judah, which isn't traditionally one of the cities of the Levites.
Right.
But the Levites have scattered cities, and presumably those that didn't have like big temple jobs might travel around. And
but Bethlehem was supposed to be like an important Judean city, I guess.
Definitely, yeah.
Judahite city.
But either way, this speaks at a time of dispersion, right? Where they're like scattered around. They're not all at the temple. So
they're according to, I'm not sure who, one of the traditional commentators, they say that both this story and the next don't happen between the story of Samson and the next book, but are actually just after Joshua dies, like the time of Othniel, or
I see
the name of that judge. And because their explanation for it is like, I think in the next story, it's going to mention like Jerusalem hasn't been captured. And what was it about this story that's weird?
Yeah, but Jerusalem being captured was supposed to be done.
I think in Chronicles it says that the statue of Mikra was up during the time of that the tabernacle was in Shiloh.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
So that lines up with an earlier date.
So there are a couple more things I want to know. So where you have this consecration of silver, right? This is one of many more rural, you could say, ritual practices. Like if you remember in chapter 13, the verse was 13:19. There was this sacrifice and offering on the rock of the Lord. There are other ones described in Judges, like certain vows and a couple more that we just haven't gotten to yet. But this seems to draw this kind of divide. You're getting different looks at like the framing is very much Deuteronomistic, but it is still like talking to you about the more popular, like on the ground religion, right? But also this family's pretty well off, so
clearly if they can not afford that much, ever having that much silver in one place and then hire a priest.
Yeah, there is. I'm gonna, after the next chapter, I'm gonna go into a little spiel about that. But either way, you kind of get those two different looks at kind of how one group perceives the other. Also, just in case anyone missed it, in 17:6, in those days there was no king in Israel. Very Deuteronomistic, like the whole verse, not just that. But everyone doing what was right in their own eyes.
They wanted.
Yeah, so it assumes a time of authorship when there were already kings at some point in time.
And I like this passage too because there was no king and they could do whatever they want. So they said that we're an anarcho-syndicalist commune. We're taking turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified in a special bi-weekly meeting by simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs, or by 2/3 majority in the case, well, you see where this is going.
Oh, Dennis, we've got some lovely filth over here.
Hey, but at least we gotta give this man credit. You know, the idol maker. At least he went to a silversmith. Because last time I read anyone making an idol in the Bible, like say Aaron, he just like out poof came the golden calf. Like it was just like
he him
just threw it all
talking to
together.
Moses afterwards. I just threw everything in the fire, and I don't know what happened. It just turned into a really precise sculpture with lots of detail.
Because, you know, things accidentally happen like that.
Totally.
By the way, there's a comment in the chat wanting to know, what is it that Lawrence is smoking?
It's a hookah. This is a hookah.
I don't think that the apparatus is what they were asking about.
The question you should have asked is what flavor?
Oh, okay. Well, the flavor is grape mint.
Okay.
Yeah. Grape mint. But a lot of people seem to think that, I don't know, like whenever I do anything with Aaron, like I'm usually smoking. And Aaron, I hope, and you too, Mark, actually everyone here, I guess. I hope you guys don't take this as a sign of disrespect. It's just something that I do. But a lot of people seem to think it's disrespectful. And
really?
You aren't blowing smoke in my face. So
yeah, but the thing is, like, I feel like I can maintain a conversation just the same.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that the hookahs are intended to be like a social thing.
They are.
Yeah. When I was in Dubai,
together,
when I was in Dubai, I found myself in a Syrian restaurant. The United States doesn't even have Syrian restaurants. But we're at this lovely outdoor place, and everybody's table has multiple hookahs, and so we're doing that with our food. And the last time that I was able to hang out with Lawrence, he took me to a hookah bar.
Yeah,
I have family members who smoke a hookah, even my sister.
Yeah, it's just a thing that I do. So I hope that you guys don't take that as a sign of disrespect, because I certainly don't mean it that way. But a lot of people think that it's also like a bong because they don't know what a hookah is.
Well, to be fair, in the 70s and 80s, they were appropriated for that purpose,
right? Yeah,
most often.
Which, by the way, there's just so you guys know, there is if you are going to use it as an apparatus for that, there's a certain way to do it. You don't just fill the whole thing with weed, because that will fuck up your hookah. That, like, the res is gonna get all in the hose. I remember not in the hose, in the stem. I remember a friend of mine did that like a fucking idiot. First of all, that's a lot that can fit in there, and he was just like, I mean, he was like almost knocked out, and he was like begging for someone else to help him smoke, and we're like, no, you dug this hole for yourself. So he was just like, he just like passed out.
Okay, I'm going to challenge Tomer. I think we're getting off topic.
I do need to say this though, real quick. When I first started watching the show, and before I started seeing smoke coming out of it, I remember thinking to myself, when's this guy gonna start playing the flute?
I mean, yeah, there's some moments for musical interludes.
All right, well, that was the end of my little spiel. I know Tomer probably has.
Lawrence, have you finished your commentary?
I have finished. I mean, for now, yeah, finished my commentary.
Yeah. So, I see one comment.
Tomer, you going to take a turn?
Yeah, but I see one comment. Maybe you want to read it first.
Okay. Teddy Two Guns offers $2 and says, "Hi, Aaron from." Is that pronounced Seward? I guess Seward. But
yeah,
thank you very much,
Seward,
Teddy
Alaska.
Two Guns.
It's a city.
Oh.
Okay.
And appropriate for the name, Teddy Two Guns posted that twice, so there's twice $2.
Thank you, Teddy.
Okay, so I'll start first. I have an
it's Teddy Four Guns. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. So I'll start with the introduction to chapter 17, which is basically a comment by Nelson. He writes, Chapter 17 exists completely for the sake of chapter 18. The linked episodes of these two chapters provide readers with an etiology for the image of the Dan sanctuary and for the founder of its priestly house. In this sense, all of chapter 17 and 18 point directly forward to the final paragraph of chapter 18. These narratives twist both the image and the priesthood of the Danite cult into a moderately negative direction. Unlike other Yahwistic sanctuaries or priestly dynasties described in the Bible, Yahweh has nothing to do with the establishment of either of these for Dan. Yeah. Instead, the image results from a somewhat obscure family financial problem, perhaps involving theft and restitution, and a need to counter the power of a mother's curse. Dan's founding priest serves this image, not as one elected by divine choice, contrast Numbers 25, 11-13, Deuteronomy 18, 5, 33 verses 8 through 11, and 1 Samuel 2, 20 and 35, but as one who first comes to a practical employment agreement with its owner and then opts for a better deal in a situation of mortal threat. The text does stress, however, that he is a legitimate Levite and a descendant of Moses.
A descendant of Moses.
Yeah, in 1830, we'll see that he's called. His name is Gershom, son of Moses. Although the MT has a Manasseh, like a nun at the top, because to honor Moses or respect, whatever. We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
And a couple of things before I start the commentary. First, I didn't check it before we started recording, so I might have some errors. If so, I apologize. And secondly, no ancient Christian commentaries on these 17 and 18.
Wow.
Yeah, none.
Shocker.
I know. I didn't think it was possible. There's something they can't.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Where are we going to get our Jesus on?
I guess we found the only two chapters in the entire Bible that doesn't mention Jesus.
I think it's because they're gun shy, because they're afraid if they point out anything in 18, then someone will carry on to 19, and then they have to start answering the really bad questions, like what the fuck is wrong with you?
Okay,
is there commentary on 19? Sorry. Is there any Christian commentary on 19?
Oh yeah,
there needs to be. I mean,
the history of Christian scholarship and the church fathers. There's a combined history of great, beneficence and charity combined with like sadism and psychotic cruelty of the most demented kind. So, and they often can't tell the difference. So,
yeah, there is, but it's mostly by Ambrose.
Oh, fuck me.
Yeah, I am hopeful that we're going to make 19 today.
Maybe, but if we do, I have a picture for Peter. So, I'll send it after.
See, a picture in the context of chapter 19 is actually kind of terrifying.
No. No. It makes sense. It's basically just a list of proposals for the texts.
Okay,
dating.
gotcha. Okay.
Okay, I want everybody to be prepared for that, so we don't necessarily have to do it. We can just do 17 and 18 today.
It's okay. I have weed for next week if we don't get to it.
Well, this week is Saturday as well, so.
Yeah, and we've only what have we only got 3 chapters left, I think.
17 It's 17 through 21.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can divide it up between this week and next week, and we'll be fine.
And this week, okay. So on verse 1, a man of Mount Ephraim. I'm reading the KJV here. Mount Ephraim is a very broad location. Butler writes that the hill country of Ephraim represents the best of Israel in its leaders, Joshua and Phinehas, Joshua 17:15, 19:50, 27, etc., and in the work of Ehud and Deborah in Judges 3:27 and 4:5. It also represents the beginning of disputes with the tribe of Ephraim in 725, as well as the home of the Issacharite judge Tola in 10:1. Amit writes that Mount Ephraim can include both the territory of Joseph, according to Joshua 17:15, and that of Benjamin in 1 Samuel 9, verses 4-5. She writes that the term reveals the name of the person, but also hides his place of residence using the broad area of Mount Ephraim. She further writes, According to Chazalic tradition, Micah resided in Gerav, next to Shiloh, according to Talmud Sanhedrin 103b. Chazalic tradition also attempts to discover Micah's genealogy, and some identified him with Nabat, father of Jeroboam, who placed the calves at Bethel and Dan, according to Sanhedrin 101b. Early and late Jewish scholars attempted to connect Micah from Mount Ephraim with characters or events associated with Bethel. For instance, in the alphabet of Sirach, Micah is identified with the old prophet from Bethel, found in 1 Kings 13, verses 11 to 32. Rashi, in his commentary on the conquest of Bethel in Judges 1:22, wraps the act of Micah with the story of the city's occupation. Quote, although Micah's idol was in their possession, for Micah was from the tribe of Ephraim, it is said here, and the Lord was with them. Yeah, and the Lord was with them, end quote. Some interpret the phrase Mount Ephraim to mean Bethel in other texts, such as Jeremiah 4:15 and 2 Chronicles 19:4, etc. It seems, therefore, that the broad term from Mount Ephraim is used to both cover and hint to Bethel.
So to be clear, they are saying that he is associated with the more famous prophet Micah, who has many very similar stories told about him to the ones told about Elisha.
No, I don't think. No, the reference not to Micah, the one on the 12 prophets.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because that's, you said the association with other characters such as the Micah. And, oh, mind you, that was Kings.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There's an old prophet from Bethel in 1 Kings. Yeah.
Yes.
So did you mention the alphabet of
yes,
Ben
I
Sira?
did.
Yeah,
I did.
that's the best. If for anyone that hasn't read it, first of all, they should go watch our reading on now it's called Wednesday Apocryphal Podcast, but at the time it was Friday Apocryphal Podcast. And you should definitely go watch our reading of the alphabet of Ben Sira. It's the absolute funniest book we've ever read. It's a parody work. I think the author is making fun of rabbis, honestly, but it's so funny. It is so that's where we get the story of the first story, by the way, of Lilith as the first wife of Adam. That's the first time that appears, and that book was written anywhere between like 800 or 1000 CE. So it's a very late text, but it is so funny, and that's where we get that story from. That's the origin of that.
Well, making fun of rabbis is a prestigious line of work with a long and glorious tradition. I don't think it's that hard when I think about some of the or Christian theologians. When I think about some of the commentary that Tomer has gifted us with. Oh my God, guys! Sometimes, what the hell are you thinking?
Yeah, so people should go listen to that because it's really, really funny.
Okay, now on Micah, in this verse he is called Michayehu, which means who is like Yahweh. And Butler comments, Micah's ensuing actions may give an unexpected answer to the question his name asks. Wong observes, quote, what is most curious is that in these initial episodes, the characters who were primarily responsible for commissioning the idols are actually portrayed as Yahwists, albeit Yahwists who seem totally oblivious to the glaring incongruity between their professions of faith and their actions, end quote. Yet, as McCann emphasizes, quote, it seems that absolutely no one in chapters 17 through 18 knows what God is like, end quote. The behavior of Micah and his mother is ludicrous, according to McCann. Now on verse 2, 1,100 shekels of silver. Amit writes that the average weight of the shekel was 11.39 grams, which is around 0.4 ounces. And so the overall weight of the stolen silver was over 12.5 kilograms, or around 27.5 pounds. She notes that this is the same amount each Philistine ruler gave Delilah to betray Samson, 16:5. This led Jewish exegetes to connect between the two stories. Rashi, for example, writes, the episodes are juxtaposed because of the corrupt silver, which was of equal value in each of the incidents. The silver inflicted injury in both cases, end quote. He also notes that some suggested that the mother is Delilah herself.
I mean, that's stretching, but I suppose I could certainly see it. being lined up that way might look like she was the mother.
Now, on that were taken from you, in Hebrew, asher lukach lach, meaning that were stolen from you, according to Rashi and Kimchi. Vaticanus and Vulgate read, which you took for yourself. Fernández-Marcos writes that the Vaticanus is, quote, very probably exegetical in order to avoid the impression that the silver has been stolen, silver that was destined for use in building an image of God, end quote. Symmachus translates, that you were taken from.
Interesting grammar.
Yeah, about which I heard you utter a curse. Hebrew Bible reads, and you have cursed, and you also told in my ears. The exact wording of the curse is not given. Nelson writes that the overall awkward syntax may indicate that the authors or transmitters of the text circumspectly suppressed the actual wording of the curse. Fernández-Marcos notes that this led some commentators like Moore, Burney, and Sojin to alter the text. He writes, however, that there is no textual basis for changing the MT. On
So
blessed of the...
they cut out the curse so that we wouldn't, in the course of reading it, accidentally bring bad juju on ourselves by repeating the magic words of the special curse that is so very, very real.
It's like in movies where someone whispers something and you can't hear what they say.
Yeah, you really do have to appreciate them for that.
Yeah, well, it's censored for security purposes, I guess.
Now on verse, on that same verse, blessed of the Lord be my son. Abravanel writes, his mother responded, blessed of the Lord be my son, i.e., the curses are not attached to you, but you are blessed from all the nations since you admitted to this matter, end quote. Amit writes that the intention of the blessing is to nullify the curse. The belief in the magical act of speech presents the blessing as a force, quote unquote, that can nullify a curse. On verse 3, to make an image overlaid with silver. The term used for image is pesel v'masecha, literally a carved image and a cast metal image. Nelson writes that this is a hendiadys indicating a single statue, as seen in Deuteronomy 27:15 and Judges 18:14. Niditch writes that the hewn and cast objects, quote unquote, are not idols, but iconic representations that allow worshippers to focus upon the deity and his or her qualities. The icon symbolizes the indwelling presence of the deity. Amit writes that the assumption that there is a connection between this image in Dan and Mount Ephraim and the calf worship in Bethel and Dan strengthens the assumption that this image is a calf image, Egel Masecha, as seen in Exodus 32:4 and 2 Kings 17:16. She writes, however, that Micah and his mother are not portrayed as people who worshipped other gods, but worshipped Yahweh incorrectly.
Leading to the idea that
the place I think is called the house of the gods, right? The house of gods.
Mm-hmm.
Where? In what place first?
Hold on.
That might be in 18 when they're talking about the altar there.
Because if it's Elohim, then it can refer to God.
It could refer to the one depending on how late this was. Yeah.
It's also called the House of Micah. So
yeah.
yeah, true.
Okay, now on verse 4, 200 shekels of silver. What about the rest of the silver? Kimchi writes that the 200 shekels were the payment for the smith, and with the 900 million shekels, he made the sculpture and molten image. Abravanel, however, rejects this since the text does not mention that. Instead, he writes that she got greedy and kept the 900 shekels for herself. Butler notes Bloch's observation that the 200 shekels, quote, would actually not have yielded a very impressive cult statue, end quote. He also notes Jason S. Bray's suggestion that the 900 shekels were used to create the ephod and the teraphim. The Lucianic Recension and Vitus Latina omit the 200. Nelson attributes it to an inner Greek haplography resulted from the common abbreviation of 200 as a single sigma, which later dropped out due to repetitions of his mother and the silver.
I have to wonder though, because I know she says she consecrates all the silver to God, but if it was stolen and returned, and that is, even if they're well off, that is a significant amount of silver, and you take a portion of it to make the idol, that makes some sense. But what's the point in even getting your life savings back if you have to make the entire thing into an idol and you can't use it for anything?
Now on verse 5, a shrine. In Hebrew, Bet Elohim. Okay, yeah, there it is. Literally, house of Elohim. While the word Elohim can denote a god, like seen in the Septuagint and Targum, which reads the idol, or multiple gods, some modern commentators like Butler, Niditch, and Nelson read God, capital G God. Amit notes that house of God appears 2 more times in the Bible, and in both instances, it is related to the ancient holiness of Bethel, seen in Genesis 28, verses 17 and 22. She writes that this confirms the claim regarding the connection between Micah's house of God and between the Bethel sanctuary.
Yeah,
Now-
there's clearly a very ancient site of worship there, that there seems to be almost many of these stories seem to carry like overtures of trying to fold in your own worship to the place that people have already got this long history with. You know, a
Yep.
bit like holly and ivy having anything to do with Christmas.
Now on ephod and some household gods, Hebrew Bible reads ephod and teraphim. Amit writes that these are tools to inquire of God, and with the ephod being a more legitimate tool, according to 1 Samuel 2:28. The teraphim are known from Hittite texts as a benevolent or malevolent spirits, or shedu, or to their statue, and are described in the Bible as idolatry, 2 Kings 23:27. She writes that the attachment of the ephod to the teraphim with the sculptured image and molten image is meant to indicate a ritualistic object which was improper for use. Nelson writes that an ephod seems to have been a priestly vestment that served divinatory purposes, as did the teraphim, as in Zechariah 10:12 and Ezekiel 21:26, although these are generally rendered as domestic gods. He writes that their precise nature and function are not crucial for the narrative. Rather, the point is that Micah had personal access to a complete range of cultic facilities.
Yeah, complete access. And they're all very personal, right? It's the house of Micah. Although, like, I think the things that are listed here, most of them, and not just here, but also in chapter 18, most of them are very often portrayed negatively. Like even the ephod, right? What was that? Was that under Gideon? That he set up one and then people worshipped it or something like that. So there, I think, was that
It might
Gideon?
have been during the second half of the story where he was called Jerubbaal, or it might have been his. But yeah, I think there was an ephod. Although there is also the description of what's called an ephod for the priests, which is
Right. Yeah.
you know, a priestly garment that is, it seems quite different. Whereas these ephods, as described in Judges, appear to be more like idols in the sense that they're somewhat on their own.
The thing I like about having household gods, where you're having domestic gods within the household, is that they have to answer your prayers or else they'll get fired.
Although I do see a comment, Butler cites Wong, who observes, one can say that the use of ephod in a pejorative sense as an idolatrous cultic object is actually quite uncommon.
Yeah, definitely uncommon. That's why I think the only negative connotation, or the only negative one I can think of, is the one from Gideon. I think it was Gideon, right?
I think, I said, I think it's the second half of his story, which is probably from a different location where he's Jerubbaal.
Yeah, that's the only negative one I can think of for like.
The only other times I hear them referred to are as cult objects for the Yahwist cult and for the priesthood, the legitimate priesthood. I do think it's so funny because you can definitely feel that like parts of this were written earlier than a lot of the law that we already read. And that's kind of funny.
Well, actually, it's interesting you say, because Guillaume sees the opposite here. He sees the possibility that these two cultic elements could be, quote, later additions, as these elements play no role in the story, although nothing permits us to affirm it. Unquote.
Yeah, they totally could be. This is a very weird story, very strange placement.
And the next verse is random as well.
It still has the feel of like feeling the need to fit something existing in or fix something, but yeah, the cluelessness about how you're not supposed to have images, everything feels just from an older form before, you know, they manage to get the rules in and be all, oh, we'll kill you if you have a statue.
Now, on
I mean the next verse seems, I'm just saying, the next verse seems to imply that, like, and then Micah did this, blah blah blah, and then it says, in those days there was no king, everyone did as they pleased. It's almost like you could think of it as an introduction to the next bit, but it also seems to be a comment on what's happened.
A note,
so far.
and maybe an editorial note.
Yeah. Well, it's a Deuteronomistic refrain in their histories.
Yeah.
In those days, there was no king, and everyone was there. Like it
is connected with the previous section, because there was like a chapter break afterwards.
There's
Sorry. Now on installed. Sorry.
It's fine.
Okay. Now on installed one of his sons as his priest. Hebrew reads, he filled one hand from one of his sons. The phrase to fill the hand is used to appoint and consecrate someone to priesthood, as seen in Exodus 29:9, Leviticus 8:33, Numbers 3:3, etc. Butler writes that the sons' installation as priests may have represented desperate measures that some local sanctuaries took and served as preparation for and contrast to the installation of the Levite as priest.
Yeah, so coming up, not just with his son, but with the Levite too, you have here, this is something that is very common in like folk ideologies. You have these, so you have this installation of the son being hired to do this task, but then you also have someone that you're personally hiring to do this task for you. This is very common in the ancient world.
It sounds a bit like when dad agrees to give you extra allowance if you help the workmen with something and they're really doing it and you're just getting in the way. But I don't know, maybe they get paid extra to put up with you almost.
To me, it almost sounds like when somebody's trying to put together a scam, you know, like we're going to have a pretend doctor. Oh, where do doctors come from? Let's see. They go to school. They go to Harvard. So let's get a diploma. And what do they wear? They wear a lab coat. So let's put a lab coat on him, you know? Like this guy is a Levite, you know, he's got the right attire. That means we're legitimizing his, you know, his role, right?
Well, the thing is, he doesn't have land per se, right? So, so to work at a shrine of any kind is probably the only thing you can really do.
Yeah, it just seems like it's just full of irony altogether. You know.
Yeah, it definitely is. It gets more ironic with the next chapter too.
Yeah. I feel that.
Now on verse 6, Niditch writes that verse 6 is, quote, far from an overt, zealous condemnation of the kind found elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, end quote. This verse intends to inform the readers that, quote, these were early times before the monarchy, when religious expression had not yet become uniform or orthodox, end quote. Butler, however, writes that it is doubtful that an original reader would see, quote, such a sophisticated meaning in them, end quote. Rather, the statement, quote, gives the audience a reason to support a certain variety of kingship, but not the northern variety that leads to such discredited religious practices, end quote. He further writes, a disjunctive temporal clause in those days introduces the editorial recital. Interestingly, the two-part theological summary of 17:6 appears here at the juncture of two parts of the Micah narrative, not at the beginning or end of the whole narrative. As such, it is presented as integral to this narrative, while other partial and entire quotations will serve as introductions, 18:1 and 19:1, to individual narratives or as conclusion to the entire epilogue. Amit notes that Micah's generation understood all the practices described in the following narrative as, quote, legitimate and desired cultic behavior that will bring reward upon its owners. precisely the fact that all of the parties acted in innocence and with the intention of doing what is right in the eyes of God rather than out of wickedness or contempt reveals the distorted values of the period. On verse 7, a young man out of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite. I'm reading KJV here. From the text, it seems like this young man, whose name is Jonathan in 1830, is both a Judite and a Levite. Some traditional commentators, like Rashi, Kara, and Ditrani, wrote that his mother was a Judite and his father was a Levite. Kimchi, however, rejects this, since scripture doesn't associate a person through his mother. Instead, he and Gersonides wrote that Jonathan was a Levite who resided in Bethlehem, which was part of Judah. Rava Bar Rav Hanan in Talmud Bava Batra 109b writes that because he acted as Manasseh, the king of Judah, he is described as from the family of Judah. Nelson renders mishpacha, usually meaning family, to mean clan seat, i.e., the town with which a kinship group was traditionally associated. Butler, however, writes that such a reading seems to miss the irony of the chapters. He writes, the text shows Dan unable to decide if it is simply a clan or has the strength of a tribe. These chapters picture a Levite expected to serve at a sanctuary as a priest, but unable to find a satisfactory place to live or serve, and so choosing to be a resident alien even in territory he refers to as his homeland. The final word of verse 7 makes the ironic meaning evident. The Levite is a resident alien there, that is, right among his own people. Even when he should be most at home, he feels most alienated and in need. Antonius H.G. Guneweg shows that one can be a member of a tribe and a resident alien within the tribal territory, end quote. Vaticanus and Peshitta omit the family of Judah, which Fernández-Marcos attributes to Homo Eoteleuton. Now, on verse 10, my father and priest. My father and priest. Butler writes, the term father here is a title of honor addressed to people with special relationship. An older person, 1 Samuel 24:12, teacher, 2 Samuel 2:12, 2 Kings 2:12, prophet in 2 Kings 6:21, priest in Judges 17:10 and 18:19, husband, Jeremiah 3 verses 4 and 19, or advisor, Genesis 45:8, end quote. Nelson writes that there is a bit of rhetorical artistry in showing that the Levite is hired as a father and treated as a son. And Niditch comments, having a genuine Levite serve in the shrine is deemed to be preferable to the ad hoc arrangement with Micah's own son. The passage beautifully portrays relationship in terms of kin. The priest, not having a set hereditary homestead of his own in the style of the Levites, becomes a member of Micah's family, a retainer attached to a home shrine. Okay, now I have an optional commentary, and it's a very short one, about the 10 shekels of silver a year. Amit notes the discrepancy between the Levite's yearly payment and the 1,100 shekels of silver which Micah stole from his mother, indicating the great richness of the house of Micah.
What was the typical yearly wage for a skilled worker at that time?
I assume, I don't think it's much less than what is described here. Although,
okay, so 10 shekels is underpaying, but it's not like Ebenezer Scrooge.
The thing is, the family is loaded.
Yeah. No, fair point.
Yeah,
and if they are underpaying, they should not be doing that while they are loaded. But
yeah, like they have not, and it's described more in the next chapter, but like they have not only this this shrine itself, their own miniature sanctuary, but they also have a home for this Levite to stay in. So they have a guest house and a shrine. This is a wealthy family.
Yeah,
darling, we have old money.
Yeah.
Very much. No, and the Levite got a good deal. He found a great patron for his craft, if you will, and can't blame him for that.
Now on that same verse, so the Levite went in. I'm reading KJV again. Hebrew, it's Vayelech Halevi. The Levite went. Rashi wrote that the Levite went after Micah's proposal. Kimchi writes that the Levite went to Micah's needs and to what he commands, since he is to live with him. Nelson notes that several English translations, like NIV, RAB, and RSV, omit this phrase following BHS's proposal to see it as a detography of the first words of verse 11, Vayoel HaLevi, and the Levite decided. Moreover, some Septuagint manuscripts insert "and the Levite approved" before "and the Levite went" to soften the transition. Butler, however, writes that the text progresses from movement toward the house to eager acceptance of the offer. He notes Bautusch's opinion that no such change is needed without manuscript evidence, and that the MT makes sense. Fernández-Marcos writes, obviously MT is the more difficult reading, and the versions have chosen different options of translation. It is more prudent, however, to respect the difficult reading of the MT supported by the Septuagint, which takes into account the gap in meaning between the end of verse 10, and the Levite went, and the beginning of verse 11, the Levite agreed to move in with the man. This gap can be explained as follows. The Levite continued first with his exploratory excursion in search of available posts, and only after that accepted Micah's offer. This would explain the fact that in verse 13, Micah interprets the Levite's acceptance as a blessing from the Lord. And finally, on verse 13, Niditch writes that Micah's declaration suggests that the Levites are wandering holy men who bring good luck with them. They are, quote, the quintessential mediators between God and humans, have divinatory abilities, and are quite a catch for the repentant son, conman, and cult founder, end quote. Butler notes Bloch's opinion, quote, Micah assumes that now he has engaged a member of this clan, he has automatic access to the resources of heaven.
I mean, considering cult practices and religion in general in those times, that's not a stretch.
What's the difference between good luck and blessings?
Well, I do know that inside every bless your heart is a teeny tiny fuck you.
Pareidolia.
Yeah, but as I understand it, the blessings are the opposite of curses.
Uh-huh.
They are both magical enchantments. So that, good thing, if you are blessed, then good things will happen to you. As we've heard before, people will give blessings. They'll state a wish that they'll literally make wishes on your behalf. And so that's a blessing that the thing that they wished for will eventually come true. In less specific terms, it just means that things are going to be a little more beneficial for you. Like for role gamers, of course, you're going to recognize +5 on your saving throw, right?
Yeah.
For example. Whereas curses are the opposite, right? So you can have specific curses. You're going to be cursed to endure this particular pain or whatever, or you're just going to be cursed to have a generally shitty time. And I've known people that their whole lives seem to be that way. Weirdly, it's always Christians whose entire lives they're plagued with just like failure after failure, and they can't catch a break, even though they're they didn't do anything to deserve the terrible life that they live. So good luck, bad luck, blessings, curses, the fuck is the difference?
Yeah, I do have thoughts.
Actually, sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Specifically with regard to what you said, Aaron, for people who, and I know this because having lived determined to do what God wanted and to follow his plan for my life, I can tell you no plan is worse than God's plan, because God's plan is fuck all. God's plan is that you try and make your way through life blind, believing there's a map you're not allowed to look at, but it will tell you what you're supposed to do if you could. And you have to take things that happen as signs. And this is done very formally in the evangelical church. And it reminded me of this. And it might actually be a reason why your friends go through what they do, Aaron. But I'll give you an example. My favorite youth pastor, really good woman, actually, it encouraged rebellion a little bit in the good kids, which we really needed. But she, she's the kind who would say, hey, you know what? Be good. If you can't be good, be careful. If you can't be careful, name it after me. But when she got the job at my church, she didn't really want to go there because it was a Baptist church and she was kind of done with their shit. And so she had an interview and she tried to be as contentious as possible. They all just, if you found out that 2 of the youth group were having sex, well, how do I know they're having sex? Did they tell me? Did someone else tell me? How reliable is this information? Has it been verified? Blah, 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 blah. Being as contentious woman as she can. I love Sarah for this. She gets the call afterwards and they say, okay, so we voted on it and I want you to pray and decide what percentage agreement among our vote you would feel comfortable as the Lord is guiding you to this position. And she thought Baptists never agree on anything. She just said in her own head, Baptists never agree on anything, 80%. It was 100% voted for her. So she felt that God had called her to that position. And given that it did actually benefit me, I'm not going to argue. But you can see also how that kind of mentality could be crippling because you don't know when a difficulty is something to overcome or when it's the Lord guiding you away. And if you can apply that kind of nonsense to the universe too, well, we'll just see what works out, what doesn't. But the universe isn't going to fry you for all eternity if you guess wrong.
So I did have a thought there on fortune and good luck and blessings. So good luck has kind of been secularized at this point. It just means good luck, and there's nothing there's nothing supernatural about it. But in the ancient world, luck or fortune was in fact personified. It was seen as an outside force. So at this point, like the blessing, you might say, is just the spell portion of the luck. But there is that part. Like if you read like especially Roman literature, oh my god, the like in the Aeneid, in the Golden Ass, there is so much personification of fortune.
Oh, Fortuna, yeah. She's a goddess, but she's like a minor goddess, more like a muse, right? Not a muse literally, but just talking about
minor, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like that level.
I'm sorry, I didn't even check them. I'm just seeing the comments piling up.
Yeah, okay. I was hoping to jump to those. So unpronounceable Japanese name, but I'm sure Tomer.
Which shockingly is the way to pronounce it.
It's internet user.
Okay.
That's literally what it says. It says internet user.
Internet user says, Aaron, have you heard of early mid-2000s internet atheists like Nick Gisborne or Pat Condell? Also, would you like to host a conversation on stream with Robert Sapolsky and Erica? I've heard of Pat Condell, and I tell you sincerely, he probably did 2 videos way back early in his career that I liked. I've seen a lot since. And I've never heard of Nick Gisborne. And I don't know. I would be happy to host a conversation with Robert Sapolsky or Erica. I'm wondering why the 2 of them together, as I can't figure out what they have in common.
Maybe that's the point. Because they have nothing in common, then you have
okay, so what do we have? Apples and oranges?
Yeah,
nice fruit salad. So the Nick Gisborne, I forget the name because that's like an OG. I remember the name Nick Gisborne.
Did he have another moniker?
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah. But I do remember that name from back in the day. Like and the thing is, when it was so funny when you asked if you heard of these people, because like Aaron is one of those people. He was of that OG generation.
Him, Seth Andrews, and Matt Delahanty, the Unholy Trinity. Like they've been there back in the day. They lived through the anti-SJW uprisings and the all sorts of nonsense that went on in the atheist community.
What was that phrase that Bain uses? I forget the exact wording, but
I can remember one Bain quote, "What a lovely voice," and that's pretty much it.
Wow. Okay, that's not even the good one. Okay.
You know who I miss? The living dinosaur. I miss his science, but I also miss his really creative insults.
Yeah. To answer the question more directly, I would be delighted to have a discussion with Robert Sapolsky. I would, and if you, I don't understand how Erica, being a paleoprimatologist, paleoanthropologist, and Robert Sapolsky being a neuroscientist, I'm not sure where the overlap is. There certainly doesn't seem to be a conflict.
They just clarified. Erica seems to be a huge fan of Sapolsky.
Oh, cool.
Okay, well, I get that. And yeah, sure. If she wants to have a conversation with him, and that she finds that she has some commonality in that, and for whatever reason I can be part of that somehow, yeah, I'd be happy to be part of that. Of course, I'd also like to have a discussion with him myself. I like to talk to neuroscientists whenever I can. So yeah, I would be delighted. So I'm moving on to the next comment. Please, internet user, try to set that up. Thank you. Then moving on to the next comment, Kent McLeod said, "Humor me, Aaron. How does one go about saving a family member from your good old friend, Mr. Kent Hovind, himself implying that dinosaurs not being extinct due to the word being recent?" Yeah, that's quite an idiotic argument. If you can put me in touch with your friend, I'd be happy to have a video discussion with them. And even if I can't have a video discussion with it, which might be my preference, obviously, but if you can put me in touch with them at all, I would be happy to help them, and I'm sure I can in quick order. Then Trevor and Wright.
Also, there's maybe they should go watch your video about the emus and how dinosaurs are not extinct.
Yeah.
Well,
the systematic classification of life, Aaron has gajillions of videos.
Well, I've seen cassowaries.
I think there's also a series.
Fair point.
I had an emu.
Yeah. I think there's a short series specifically on birds are dinosaurs or something like that.
Yes, I did a 10-part series with Darren Naish, where we cover all of the definitive characteristics to prove that birds are in fact dinosaurs, and we did that while also contradicting Dr. David Minton, who was the speaker. He's an anatomist who was working for Answers in Genesis. He did a presentation, hour long, whatever, trying to distinguish birds from dinosaurs on a handful of bullshit excuses. So we showed not only that Answers in Genesis, that their anatomist was incompetent and well outside of his field, but that he was also being deliberately deceptive, dishonest, lying to the audience, because that's what they pay for. They want to believe what they want to believe, even if they know it's not true. They just want somebody with a PhD behind their name in a legitimate science degree from a real institution to say, no, dinosaurs are not related. And his argument ultimately boiled down to it. I love this. If a dinosaur has feathers, it's a bird. And that was the sentence he used. If a dinosaur has feathers, it's a bird.
See, Arn, they discovered the law of monophyly all by themselves.
Look at that! Accidental win! They failed so hard they made a win in the other direction.
Dinosauria sensu stupido.
Yep.
Yeah,
then
I
moving
want
on
to say
to
one
the
thing with regard to helping friends who are in creationism. Obviously, we know that everything they believe is based on this ridiculous parody idea, this silly version of science. But if you try and explain that to them, you're just going to end up chasing rabbit holes and talking at cross purposes, because they've had this deliberately cultivated idiotic parody of evolution, which is what they're actually talking about, and they don't realize that it doesn't bear any relationship to the actual science. Yeah. People who have gotten out of, I'm thinking of Paulogia as a good example, people who have gotten out of young earth creationism have gone about it usually in two ways. Myself, moving away slowly with a bit of humor, gaining distance from sort of more extreme views, or Pelagia, who watched the debate with Bill Nye and Ken Ham, I believe, and was so struck by the dishonesty of Ken Ham's position that he just, like, that was it. He pretty much, he started educating himself further, but he was completely open to learn at that point. That's the problem with trying to get your friend. If they're not willing to face the dishonesty of the position, you're just going to end up, knocking your head against a wall. So if they value truth, I might look at it from that angle.
All right.
Let's see more comments.
Some of these.
Aaron's muted. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry. I'll read the next comment. Trevor on Wright says, "What exactly is unique about the Bible stories that aren't common to the ancient world? Is there anything different about it when compared to the ancient world?"
I mean, when we're talking about the the surrounding world, there are differences. They often take some of the popular mythologies, some of the motifs, but then they change them up to work for themselves. So there's a different form of these myths.
It's not special in any kind of truly unique way, the way that I think a lot of Christians like to pretend.
It's not special.
There's a unique thing about every religion. That's how they're distinct.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like it's not, but it's not, there's no aspect of it that comes from outside as a revelation. It's the same motifs that are going around. They adapt them to their own purposes. Those purposes are totally understandable in a historical and religious context and political context. There's nothing like, magical and shit.
But what is somewhat clear is that it seems like the Torah went through some sort of demythologizing, at least, of some of those tropes.
In certain parts, yeah, possibly.
And then also the fact that it lacks a theogony or like stories about the origins of gods or God itself. Unlike most of its contemporaries would have been having stories about where their gods came from. The Hebrew Bible doesn't seem to have that.
The next comment is from Johnny Luca Rogers, who offers €2. Thank you. And says, "Aaron Raw, do you listen to Nightwish?" Well, I probably would if I had time for pop culture anymore, but I really don't. I mean, I haven't. I get to see like one movie a year, something like that. I'm really, really busy, and it's I have to work extra hard just to try to make ends meet for the end of the month. So I mean, I don't have time to watch movies or listen to music. I'm sorry to say. And then, to tell you the truth, what I'm usually doing when I'm not having to run errands or chores or do business that I can't delegate to other people, I am reading one thing while listening to something else while writing something else.
Yeah. That's the life of a YouTuber.
My brain needs to be doing 3 things or it shuts down.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand this at all.
Like if one of those senses is not being stimulated, I'm not doing enough. So like I'm usually reading something and writing about it, and then in the background I usually just listen to something like honestly it's mostly Dark Viper AU GTA gameplay.
Yeah, and then if I have to drive somewhere, and I know that I'm going to be on the road for a half hour or more, then I'll call one of my old friends, because it's the only time I can ever talk on the phone. And so the joke is always, "Are you driving?" Well, of course, because that's the only time I'm not sitting in front of a fucking keyboard and screen.
It's good that you make time for your friends.
Well, I want to maintain some relationships. I'm managing to hold together two of them. Okay, so the next comment is "Tear Your Hair Out." I like that. and hair, for whatever reason, is the rabbit sort of form of hair. It's so much worse that they embrace the suffering because the faith tells them that living a life full of suffering is being more Christ-like. The glorification of misery is terrifying. I get that. And it's always bothered me that I've met so many Christians who complain that life is this terrible ordeal that you have to suffer through to get to the great reward that I know is not coming.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least if you're going to dedicate your life to this horrible death cult, and it's going to give you the false promise at the end and the empty threat as well, can you at least get the promise of having the good life before that?
No.
Yeah.
I
know some branches of Christianity do allow that, but of course not all of them. And you have this enormous disparity across Christianity, enough to convince me that if there was a God, he would have to step in and say, no, half of y'all just made shit up. No, it's this way. No. And then the next comment from Matt White, who says, Aaron, please confirm tyrannosaurs had feathers. In my D&D campaign, they do anyway. Tyrannosaur is a genus name. So you have Tyrannosaurus rex, for example, which is the North American version. That one, as adults, did not have feathers. But tyrannosaurs are rather like mammoths. The Columbian mammoth did not have a lot of hair. The woolly mammoth did. And so while Tyrannosaurus rex did not have feathers, Eutyrannus in Asia did. So
today I learned the T-Rex was a North American dinosaur. Okay.
I'd be ashamed being on a show with Aaron and not knowing that, but I didn't know that either.
Okay, so that's done with the comments. Are we ready to move on to the next chapter?
No, actually, yeah. I'm done. Sorry, I'm tired.
I'm tired.
So is that a yes or
yeah? It's a yes. It's a yes. It's a yes.
All right, so I will go ahead and pick up.
People in the comments were wondering, Tomer,
Right.
if you had finished your commentary yet. So
No. Actually, I did forget something. First of all, I did prepare a picture for this chapter, and I hope Peter has it because I didn't tell him. I did send him previously, but I didn't tell him now. So.
Oh, for chapter 18?
I don't have it yet. Should I have it?
Oh shit! I sent it to you before.
Check your email.
Remember?
You said.
Aaron, all this labor you're paying for, it's all for naught.
Well, as you're all volunteers, at least I'm getting my money's worth.
I sent it like a week ago.
Oh, that
For a
one.
week? Oh boy, come here.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Are you prepared, Peter? Are we ready to?
Yeah, you can search for this, but I think we can continue.
No, let's.
Okay.
So what I want to do is I do kind of want to get into, 9. So part of me wants to get into 19 today because I really want to read it. I'm very excited to read it.
Yeah, I get that, but we have like 40 minutes.
It is quite long. You know?
Let's get 18.
It is late for
done.
you as well. Yeah.
So,
Yes.
Yeah, let's get 18 done. I've got deadlines of my own that I have to face. So
18 it is.
I was being a little ambitious when I suggested that before.
Wait, Peter wanted to say something, right?
yeah, I have the picture. If you need it, just yell.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so
yell.
on Judges 18 then.
Yeah.
The migration of Dan. In those days, there was no king in Israel. And in those days, the tribe of Danites was seeking for itself a territory to live in. For until then, no territory among the tribes of Israel had been allotted to them. So the Danites sent 5 valiant men from the whole number of their clan, from Zorah to Ashtaol, to spy out the land and explore it. And they said to them, Go, explore the land. And then they came to the hill country of Ephraim, the house of Micah. They stayed there. And while they were at Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. So they went over and asked him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here?" He said to them, "Micah did such and such for me." Oh, I see you're going to hide the data, aren't you? "Micah did such and such for me, such and such. And I have become his priest." Then they said to him, "Inquire of God, that we may know whether the mission we are undertaking will succeed." The priest replied, "Go in peace. The mission you are on is under the eye of the Lord," which does not answer the question. The 5 men went on, and they came to Laish. They observed the people who were living securely after the manner of Sidonians, quiet and unsuspected, lacking nothing on earth, and possessing wealth. And furthermore, they were far from Sidonians and had no dealings with Aram. When they came to the kinsfolk of Zorah and Ashtaol, they said to them, "What do you report?" And they said, "Come, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, it is very good. Will you do nothing? Do not be slow to go, but enter and possess the land. When you go, you will come into an unsuspecting people. The land is broad. God has indeed given it to your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything on earth." I'm getting a weird sense of hospitality. You go to someplace, "Hey, we're total strangers. Can we just sleep here?" Sure. You go to the next group, "Hey, we're about to go kill our neighbors. You want to come?"
Yeah, that seems about it. Well, God does say to love your neighbor, but apparently sometimes he also wants you to kill them with kindness. So, yeah.
They went back. They went back to the Danites and told them, like, we've seen this place up north where it's a good place to attack.
I mean, this is kind of a parody of the other conquest stories that we've heard.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were sitting around living in peace and tending their fields and taking care of their children. What did they expect, the bastards?
Yeah, this place is not like heavily fortified, and they're not actually fighting as the superpower. They're just
living.
Yeah,
they live in a lovely valley. They have nice houses. They have beautiful weather. Isn't this nice?
Yeah.
We can't have that.
And then, starting from verse 11, 600 men of the Danite clan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zorah to Ashtaol and went up and encamped at Karath Jaim in Judah. On this account, that place is called Mahanedan.
Close enough.
The camp of Dan.
Mahanedan.
To this day.
You could translate it as Camp of Dan, and it was mentioned in chapter 15.
Okay. It is west of Kiriath Jearim, just downstream from the hills of Moriah. From there, they passed on the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land, that is Laish, said to their comrades, "Do you know that in these buildings there is an ephod, teraphim, and an idol of cast metal? Now, therefore consider what you will do." So they turned in that direction. Slowly I turned, step by step, and came to the house where the young Levite at the home of Micah had greeted them, and greeted him. While the 600 men of the Danites, armed with their weapons of war, stood at the entrance of the gate, the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land proceeded to enter and take the idol of cast metal, the ephod, and the teraphim. The priest was standing by the entrance of the gate with these 600 men armed with weapons, because we've got to keep reminding you they have weapons. It's not just that there's 600 of them. They have weapons. They don't need them. There's 600 of them. But you need to know that they have weapons too. When the men went into Micah's house and took the idol of cast metal, the ephod, and the teraphim, because you might have forgotten from the last 3 or 4 times we repeated that, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" They said to him, "Keep quiet. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us, and be to us a father and a priest. It is better for you to be a priest in the house of one person, or to be a priest of a tribe and clan in Israel." Then the priest accepted the offer. He took the ephod and the teraphim and the idol and went along with his people. So they resumed their journey, putting the little ones, the livestock, and the goods in front of them, because you always march the children in front of the livestock, in front of the booty. When they were some distance from the home of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house were called out, and they overtook the Danites. They shouted to the Danites, who turned around and said to Micah, "What is the matter that you have come to such company?" He replied, "You take my gods that I made, and the priest, and go away, and what have I left? How then can you ask me, what is the matter?" And the Danites said to him, "You had better not let your voice be heard among us, or else hot-tempered fellows will attack you, and you will lose your life and the lives of your household." Then the Danites went on their way. When Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his home. The Danites, having taken what Micah had made, and the priest who had belonged to him, came to Laish, to a people quiet and unsuspecting, put them to the sword, and burned down the city. Because they had a nice valley, a nice house, been living a peaceful life. But hey, 600 guys, hey, put you to the sword. Biblical family values. There was no deliverer, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with Aram. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. They rebuilt the city and lived in it. They named the city Dan, or Danny, if you want to be really familiar.
Oh, Danny boy.
Yeah. And after their ancestor, Dan, also known as Danny, who was born to Israel, but the name of the city was formerly Laish. But nobody could say Laish, so they call it Dan, or Danny. Then the Danites set up the idol for themselves. Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the time the land went into captivity. So they maintained as their own Micah's idol that he made, as long as the house of God was at Shiloh.
Yeah, so there is quite a lot to unpack here.
You think?
Yeah. There is the establishment of the cult of Dan. So Dan was also one of the places that Jeroboam would put a calf statue at. So he put one at Bethel and the other at Dan. And this kind of explains the site itself. Now there is we have excavated like a good portion of Dan, and it seems that there was settlements up from like the 13th century BCE.
Okay, hold on, I'm confused. You've excavated a good portion of Dan, but not the whole guy?
No, not the whole guy.
You only got part of him?
Yep, just like a leg. So there were settlements, there's fortresses, right? But significantly, there are no shrines found from before the 10th century BCE. And our earliest one is like from the 10th or 9th century. So the complex that there is, it's how do I describe it? It's very you can tell that it was like built in parts, like people were like adding on to it over time as well. It's kind of similar. It's like a miniature Acropolis. Like there is, of course, like the main, like the temple, right? But then like around it, there are a whole bunch of shrines and miniature kind of places for worship, and so it's kind of like that. But this idea of there being this pre-monarchical organized religious leadership, there's just not any evidence of that. It just does not pan out from the archaeology. So there was obviously there were people living there and stuff, but they didn't have like that kind of, they didn't really have that religious concentration until later. But either way, the story itself is, to me at least, it's kind of like, well, yes, like you guys obviously took over to me it's kind of polemical, right? Because they take over a place, but the place that they take over is not even really fighting back. It's not even really a competition. What a great military conquest. They as well, they take this Levite as their priest, but this Levite, as from the story, God's not really playing a role here. He just kind of, we have this. I noted this before. This half oracle, this very vague interpretation. It worked out for them because, of course, the later authors had to explain why there was this shrine at Dan, but they also had to demonize it. So they're like, okay, well, listen, the guys that took over, they were really fighting against, opponents that weren't really opponents. And also the Levite that they took with them sucked. So congrats on your victory.
They stole him, and they stole a ton of silver. They're thieves. And stealing presumably from someone who gave them hospitality, since they had been able to use the Oracle of the Levite previously, which is also a huge no-no. It's your, if you haven't exchanged any hospitality with someone, you can go ahead and kill them and take their shit. But once you've done that, there are rules.
Yeah.
I also want to give Lawrence credit for having just come up with a movie title inadvertently. So the counter film to God's Not Dead is what Lawrence just suggested. God's not really playing a role here.
God was never on your side. The only like evidence we have for like this kind of stuff existing in a period that early would be it's either late propaganda or it's family ideology, which we already kind of know is a later development by nature. So it's the entire story does to me show this interest in the difference between popular religion and more official or state religion, but at the same time you can tell the polemical lens that the author is writing through.
There is polemic there, but definitely, at least with regard to the religious practices, I don't see the level of condemnation that you get in other stories that we maybe associate more with the priestly source. They tend to be really like, and then they slaughtered them and God was pleased and said, oh, wonderful. I'm happy to see you stabbing these people. It's really, they're not subtle in those ones. But in comparison, this is fucking peak subtlety.
I want to bring attention to one verse and just kind of pose a question. So on verse 30, it says, then the Danites set up the idol for themselves. Jonathan, son of Gershon, son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the time the land went into captivity. My first observation there is, does this verse and therefore this section here, does it seem to suggest that there was a time when priesthoods were like for each tribe, as opposed to just for the entire nation?
Oh, I see what you're I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah.
So like how there would be like one certain family line I know that I'm not sure how common it was, but I do know that there was some contention between like certain family lines, like the Zadokites, right? That's like the biggest contention we hear about. So, and that's like within the
That's
greater family line,
plot
but it,
point in David.
yeah. So I'm not entirely sure, but just in case anyone's wondering, the captivity of the land is referring to the Assyrian invasion.
Oh, so not even the later Babylonian captivity.
No, because that would be like that usually they refer to as the exile, right? So
and Dan's in the north, right?
Right. Yeah. And the north got like slowly taken over in what was it, the 720s, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it was
slightly around before my time.
Both of them. Yes, someone on the panel is a vampire. Who is it?
Oh God. Yeah, Keep already accuses me that I don't sleep.
I don't think you do either.
Yeah, I know you do. Okay, so I'll start on verse 1. Amit comments, the tribe of Dan already had a territory, but it couldn't latch onto it and its area was small. Compare 1 verses 34 to 35 and Joshua 19:47. Placing the story of the sons of Dan, which deals with the tribe of Dan and its relations with the Philistines, after the Samson narrative in chapters 13 to 16, reveals a deliberation of the biblical tradition regarding the question of why Dan was forced to ask for an inheritance. Was it due to Amorite pressure, according to 1 verses 34 to 35, or a Philistine one? The transition from the story of Samson's death by the Philistines to this story creates the impression that after Samson's death, the whole tribe had to leave its place. But this impression is shaken when it is revealed to the reader that the story of the tribe's migration occurred on the third generation of the Egyptian Exodus, 1830. Historically speaking, it is probable to assume that in the second half of the 12th century BCE, during the settlement period and before a ruling king in Israel, Dan was forced to leave its place due to double pressure, conflict with the local residents of the area and with the Philistines who dwelled in the Shephelah and the coastal plain. On verse 2, Butler comments, the Danite strategy in finding land was simple. 5 men were to spy out the land in a similar fashion to Moses sending representatives from each of the tribes to spy out the entire land of Israel, Numbers 13:1 through 14:45, and Joshua sending spies to Jericho before the battle there in Joshua 2. Abraham Malamat has shown the resemblance of this narrative to earlier conquest stories. Webb has shown the distinct differences in the accounts of Dan compared to earlier conquest accounts. The Dan narrative has an Israelite tribe retreating, seeking an ungiven inheritance, marching out after Yahweh has withdrawn, fighting an isolated opponent, not one of the fortified city-states of interior Canaan, and accepting the spy's report of an easy conquest rather than a difficult one. The Dan narrative has more in common with the defeat at Ai in chapter 7 than with any real conquest narrative. Thus, Bressinger calls the Danite mission, quote, the direct antithesis of the Israelites' march to the promised land. On verse 3, they recognize the voice of the young Levite. Abravanel writes, perhaps he was singing to the statue and made many pleas before it, and for that they knew his voice, or they have heard him speak and recognized him, end quote. Modern commentators write that they've identified him based on his accent, as suggested by 12 verses 1 through 6. On verse 6, your journey has the Lord's approval. Hebrew for Lord's approval is Nochach Yehovah. The word Nochach is ambiguous and can be interpreted either as in front of or in the presence, according to the Septuagint, Rashi, and Kimchi, or in opposition, as in Proverbs 5:21. Butler quotes from Elizabeth Edith Mueller, quote, the reader is left to wonder whether this is indeed Yahweh's response to the inquiry of the spies, or whether it is merely one fabricated by the priest, end quote. The Danites interpreted the Levite as saying, from before you, i.e., assurance that their mission will succeed. Other readings include, the Lord has made straight your way, according to Targum, the Lord looks on your way, by the Vulgate, or the Lord will settle the way, according to Peshitta. On verse 7, Laish. Kimchi and Gersonides identified Laish with Leshem from Joshua 1947. And Nelson comments, Dan, or Tel el Kadi, had indeed originally been a prominent city named Laish, meaning lion. This name is mentioned in Egyptian execution texts, Mari documents, and the topological list of Thutmose III as number 31. Laish was a significant pre-Iron Age site, and its chief excavator reported a significant cultural change at the start of the first Iron period. Judges 1827 notes that the city was burned by the Danites, but absence of archaeological evidence for such an event indicates that this detail derives from what was expected from a generic conquest story. On that same verse, the people were living in safety like the Sidonians. The Hebrew Bible reads, living in security as the manner of the Sidonians, kemishpat tzidonim. As Nelson notes, the term mishpat cannot refer directly to insecurity, as though that factor characterized Sidonian life. He renders living in security following the customs of the Sidonians. Likewise, Volkit and Targum, followed by Amit and Niditch, render mishpat as custom. The word can also denote judgment, seen in the Vaticanus, Peshitta, which renders law, and BDB dictionary, and thus can mean that Sidonian laws and legal claims control the city, according to Butler. Now, there is a very difficult phrase in Hebrew there, which reads, the NIV translation is, since their land lacked nothing, they were prosperous. But the Hebrew reads, En machlim davar ba'aretz yoresh etzel. Literally, nobody machlim, a thing in the land, yoresh etzel. The words machlim and yoresh etzel are unclear. The word machlim is probably of the root chaf lamed hey and chaf lamed mem, to shame or harm, according to Vaticanus, Targum, BDB Dictionary, and Nelson. Fernández-Marcos writes that the expression should be understood based on the parallel in Job 11:3 as causing shame in some respect in the country. The phrase yoresh etzel literally means a possessor of restraint, according to BDB Dictionary. Vaticanus have oppressive inheritor of a treasury, reading otsar instead of etzel. Targum has small landowners, reading from tsoar. Symmachus has, in rest and fearlessness, nothing is being troubled on the earth. In rest and fearlessness, nothing is being troublesome on the earth in not even one way. Theodosian has, and he was not in dishonoring nor perverting place. Fernández-Marcos notes that from the time of Aaron of Jerusalem and Menachem ben Saruk, Yoresh Etzel was understood as having executive power. In my opinion, the phrase means no ruler has ravaged their territory.
Sorry to interrupt, but Tomer, can you look into the chat? Oh, never mind. Peter removed them. There was someone with what looked like a Hebrew name spamming the chat.
Antichrist.
Oh, Antichrist. You know, we wouldn't object to an Antichrist. Just don't spam the chat.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't.
Okay. Now on verse 7, had no relationship with anyone else. In Hebrew, v'davar en lahem im adam. Literally, a word or speech they did not have with a man. Most other translations follow the MT and read, they had no relations with any man. However, Alexandrinus has, they had no word with Syria, reading Aram instead of Adam. This rendition is favored by many scholars, including Amit, who writes that since Laish was not far from other cities, and so it doesn't make sense that they had no contact with others. She writes that the Alexandrinus reading emphasizes Laish's isolation from any Sidonian or Aramean support. Fernández-Marcos, however, follows Rashi and Kimchi and translates, they had no alliance with anyone, and classifies the Alexandrinus reading as an error, possibly a confusion between Dalet and Reish. Likewise, Butler, Nelson, and Niditch read, they had no relationship with anyone. Now, on verse 14, regarding Laish, the name is absent from the Alexandrinus, Lucianic recension, and Vitus Latina. This led some scholars like Moore, Burney, Amit, and Nelson to conclude that Laish is a gloss by the Masoretic text to harmonize with verse 7. Fernández-Marcos writes that while it could be the case, it can also be due to Alexandrinus' translation technique, which may have considered it redundant to mention the city. He prefers the MT as the more difficult text and sees the omission by Alexandrinus as intentional, since Laish is a city and not a territory. Likewise, Butler and Niditch preserve the MT.
Got to love commentators who prefer the more difficult translation.
It's actually, there's a technical term for that, lectio difficilio.
Yeah, so the issue with that is because here's kind of the logic behind it. So you have two readings. One of them doesn't really make all that much sense. The other one makes perfect sense. Now, which one are you likely to change from one to the other? Are you more likely to change something that doesn't make sense into something that does, or something that does make sense into something that doesn't? So that's kind of the logic behind that.
It seems logical, but
it is weird,
considering what we have all observed of religious talking points in the last 5 years and the things that they're willing to say in public, I don't know that I can fully support that logic as based in reality, even if it does make sense.
Right. So
people are pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah, but that is the logic behind it, and sometimes it makes sense to use it, other times it doesn't. So like that's just one method. Obviously, like, you know, depending on the manuscript support you have, and depending on what textual tradition, all that stuff matters, right?
You might consider it a Bayesian factor almost.
Yeah, kind of.
Sorry, good enough.
I think generally the approach is when all things being equal, the harder reading, it's typically the original one.
Yeah.
But the all things being equal, that's the key.
If there's no like ridiculous idea that it was desperately important that they somehow defend with a convoluted explanation at the time, because you know that's how apologetics works. So
yeah, especially when the harder reading goes against their doctrine.
I mean, that's not apologetics. That's critical commentary. It's BHQ. So.
Yeah, that's not apologetics.
No, I didn't mean what you said. I meant the principle of just fucking about with the most convoluted nonsense until you feel like you've covered your ass from whatever the current criticism is.
Gotcha.
I want to jump into a comment that I think is well timed. Blarg says, was there an actual time since the conception of the nation of Israel that there was no king outside of the exile?
I mean, you could say after. Was there a king after the return? I don't think there.
Not really.
Well,
not until
no, but then that's after the exile.
Right, it's after. Yeah.
So basically, there wasn't a nation of Israel at the point that this is referring to, not at the point it was written.
I mean, you could say, like, you know, from the Greek occupation period, there would have been I guess a state. Maybe.
Yeah, but the Greek is way.
Yeah, it is way later. Yeah.
Like that's not only after the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, just way later.
After the exile, it would have been like the Persian period, I guess. Or
the Achaemenid period.
Yeah.
And a bit before the exile ended would have also been Persian, I guess. Yeah,
so
there wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been until Alexander. Yeah, the Maccabees would have. So you could say exile and then post-exilic Greek, Persian Greek period, and then you have the Maccabees, and then the Romans, and then you lose the king again.
I think. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're referring to is the fact that the idea of a unified ancient nation of Israel having this entirely common history and common worship that they were just trying to get back to is the myth. It's the retcon. That's not what happened at all. These were warring tribes, sometimes friendly, sometimes, you know, there was stories that went around in oral history / mythology fashion. And, you know, I would argue David was just, you know, a petty warlord who was reasonably successful and had a lot of fancy stories told about him that was then pseudo mythologized. Not like he didn't exist, but, you know, that the stories about him were big fish.
Right. Yeah. So like once we get to like all the David stuff, that's where stuff really starts to get more historical. And like closer to, you know, the time of the Assyrians and the time of the Babylonians. That's when we get like things that are actually straight up lining up with other
reality,
with
yeah.
actual evidence.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's too bad you guys can't experience the love that is being poured upon me right now.
That is such a
I
cute
can because
baby.
I have a dog here as well.
See, I could, but I choose not to because they annoy the hell out of me.
Oh, shut up.
Did you see?
I don't trust men who dislike cats.
No, I love cats. Cats are great, but holy shit, are these whatever? Did you guys hear that?
I wish I could do that with my.
Okay, I don't know if you guys heard that, but they just knocked some shit over.
I think the word you're looking for, Lawrence, is demons.
Demons, yeah, there you go. Yeah, no, cats are awesome. When they're chill,
that's Sister Minnie.
When they're chill, it's great. But I mean, right now, oh boy, do they get on my nerves.
Well,
I got another comment. Internet user says, Aaron, which scriptures have you read besides the Bible and the Quran? I'm looking for a place to buy them, but the publication quality tends to worsen the more obscure the scripture. I have read I say that I've read the Avestas of Zarathustra. I've actually read the Zend-Avesta and the HaTanakh Nasht. And I'm sure I'm pronouncing that second one incorrectly.
We also read the Book of Mormon.
And the Book of Mormon, yes, and the Quran. And they mentioned the Quran. And the Bhagavad Gita was another important one that I read. And I want to say, well, I've read a Numa Elish. I don't know if that qualifies. The Epic of Atrahasis.
I would say
kind of Gilgamesh.
It's in the same ballpark. Yeah.
If I could throw in a suggestion for scriptures you're finding it difficult to locate, particularly very archaic ones, a resource that I frequently use, there's the Internet Archive that has like long out of print books. And also, if you like to listen to audiobooks or you just need to multitask, LibriVox, run by volunteers, has all kinds of interesting things, including the Mistakes of Moses, the Colonel Ingersoll's book, and a whole bunch of just, that's obviously not a scripture, but just archaic writings and, other stuff by John Bunyan. You wouldn't find that outside of a really annoying library where you're not allowed to touch anything, but you can just look it up on LibriVox. So
yeah, and somebody else just reminded me of the Tao Te Ching.
Oh yes, those are available everywhere, though, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I would say that trying to get like it is kind of hard to find, but try to find like more recent translations that are also like done by people that are actively working in the field, because like with some of the older stuff, you get not only is it hard to follow like from a translation perspective, but they also like get stuff wrong sometimes. Like for example, if you read like the Book of the Dead, right? Like the Egyptian Book of the Dead. There is a translation from Budge's translation, and he was like one of the OG Egyptologists. That translation sucks because since his time, we have like a lot of work has been done on deciphering Egyptian texts, and it's just very, very off. If you do want to read a better translation of that, like I do have like a pretty good copy of Papyrus. It's the Book of the Dead from Papyrus Ani. So like it's a huge book, like it's really like enormous and awkward. But yeah, the thing is always look for like more recent ones, but ones that are done by actual scholars.
Yeah, ideally, obviously. That's
I was gonna say
it's a way to get more obscure stuff, at least some version of it. But yeah, do your due diligence about translations as much as you can.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't use Joseph Smith's translation of the Book of the Dead. He even translated the title wrong.
Was that the Book of Abraham or the Pearl of Great Price? Oh, the Book of Abraham. Yeah.
Which I think the Book of Abraham is in the Pearl of Great Price. So
I don't know. That wasn't my cult.
In all fairness, going off of the Bible, Abraham is dead. So there is that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take the Kanye West approach of, well, I never read anything, but I saw Disney's Hercules.
we know from the Bible you don't have to be alive to write your own stories. So.
Oh, of course not.
Also, if you're into like the Sumerian Babylonian literature, there's one amazing resource. It's ETCSL. It's the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature, and it's got links to all of the main texts.
Is that available to anyone?
I believe so, and it's both the translations and transliterations from the cuneiform or whatever. So that's a lot of scholars use that.
I would.
Okay. The next comment from Tear Your Hair Out says, suggestion, the Chilam Bilam, a collection of Maya religious and cultural texts. Oh, I have not even touched that.
Speaking of that, speaking of Mayan texts,
That sounds awesome.
I do have my
by the way,
copy of the Popol Vuh.
Aha! Right there,
Yeah.
within arm's reach.
Well, I mean, it was over there. I had to walk to get it, but yeah.
Tear Your Hair Out put in that he misspelt it. It's Balaam, not Bilam, apparently.
Balaam. Okay, fair enough. But we should get together list some of these resources in the description after. Peter,
I still have.
And then we need to determine which one is the true one.
Well, the Bible, of course.
We all know that the only true scripture is the Princess Bride.
Are you done? Good, I'll continue. So on verses 17 through 18, already Abravanel noted the repetitious nature of these verses. The taking of the sculptures is mentioned 3 times, including verse 20, and the mention of 600 men girt with weapons twice. The section from went inside, Ba'u, in verse 17 to the end of the verse is omitted from the Vaticanus. And Fernández-Marcos notes that it is inserted as a plus in verse 18 by several minuscules of the Vaticanus group. Amit writes that most modern commentators follow the Vaticanus and suggest correcting these verses. She writes, however, that the multiple repetitions do not allow for a reconstruction of the original text. Nelson writes that verse 18a should be considered as, quote, analepsis, contemporaneous with the events of verse 17 and something like a cinematic flashback, end quote. Fernández-Marcos writes that the pluses, quote, tell us more about the history of exegesis of these chapters than they do about the original Hebrew text, end quote. On verse 22, the men. Septuagint has, and see Micah and the men. This reading is favored by Fernández-Marcos and Nelson, the former writing that the original could have been lost from the Masoretic text due to homo eo teleiuton. Butler, however, writes that the unexpressed subject of the verb nizaku, mustered or called together, may well be understood as Micah, making his explicit mention unnecessary. Niditch also preserves the MT. On verse 24, you took the gods I made. Amit writes that Micah's words express his belief that the statue represents the deity, and stealing it is equal to stealing the deity. She writes that the reader who follows the world of beliefs and opinions of biblical literature would avoid sympathizing with Micah, even though he is the offended side, since he has made a statue and an image, according to Exodus 23, 32-8, Deuteronomy 5-7, etc. Alexandrinus has, because you took my carved object that I made for myself. This reading is followed by Vulgate and favored by Fernández-Marcos, who writes that this was lost by haplography. Nelson, however, writes that the Greek plus, quote, more likely represents an anti-idolatry addition, end quote, since idolaters make gods for themselves. On verse 25, some of the men may get angry. Hebrew reads, bitter-souled people. Nelson notes that Dan had a reputation for belligerence, as seen in Genesis 49:17 and Deuteronomy 33:22. Butler notes Amit's opinion that Dan is, quote, a wild and violent tribe who developed their own scale of values, end quote. And Niditch comments, the Danites describe themselves as bitter-souled men. These are people who have nothing to lose, brigands, bandits. One thinks of Abimelech's militia of worthless and reckless men in 9:4, and the worthless men whom Yeftach gathers to himself. The vengeance of Gideon against the elders of Sukkoth in Judges 8 and David's threats against Nabal also come to mind. 1 Samuel 25, 13 verses 21. Sorry, 1 Samuel 25 verses 13, 21 to 22. These bitter-souled men are pictured as marginal, aggressive fighters hardened by living on the lam, by the very impermanence and vulnerability of the situation, and by the ambivalence of their status.
Yeah, to me, it came across kind of like I don't know, what's this, sort of like a veiled threat where you're like, oh, we'll be fair to you, but some of these men are, we can't handle them. It's up to you to keep quiet if you want them to.
Yeah, it could turn up real bad for you if you got them upset.
Yeah, that's such a nice shrine you have. Something might steal from it.
Yeah, it's very much that vibe. Like they take the Levite to be their priest, but it's also like put your hand over your mouth or else. And then it's like, hey, maybe it's better you come with us. Maybe then we won't get stabby. And also you could be still a priest. So, he's like, fine, okay.
They didn't mention a wage.
Yeah, they did not. It's a wage of life. Yeah.
No, I'm just kind of basing my observation here on the little that I know of archaeology, but it seems to me just by the description here that this isn't just some idol. This is like some remarkable idol, right? I mean, for it to be made of silver, sounds like maybe it's fairly big, fairly large, where most little statuettes and things like that, you'd figure it wouldn't be as elaborate as this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this wasn't just some little, clay figure you picked up in a shop, on the way through a city to, pay a nod to the local deities. This was a special commission of a significant portion of silver, at least coated in it.
This story is most probably like an etiological, fiction to say where the Danites got their big statue from,
or
the real
like
history might have been that they had made it. Sorry.
Oh yeah, or like what how they started their cult in general, like their shrine.
Yeah. So they might have done it in a more innocuous way, and this is like a polemic saying like, oh, they were terrible people. They conquered these helpless people. They kidnapped this priest, and they stole their idol from some guy who
between the focus on presumed idolatry and the thieving and it sort of sounds like they're trying to make everyone a little bit of an asshole in the polemic. Like there's no purely virtuous character here.
That's why God just was left out of it entirely. He just let them do their thing.
Well, I mean, they have to make the person, so they need to make the Danites look bad. But then, if the Danites kidnap this priest, we have to make the priest look bad as well, in another way. And then, if Micah made Micah was the original creator, we have to make him look bad because he made an idol. So, now like the whole thing is against the Danites.
Now, on verse 26, Butler comments, Micah returns home without his prized shrine and its Levite, for which Younger denounces Micah, quote, Micah is concerned about the loss of gods who could not even protect themselves or their maker, end quote. The narrator is concerned with a loss of political and moral control that allows the Danites to plunder at will and offers no protection or recourse for Micah. Bloch concludes, quote, with delightful irony, the despised Danites serve as agents of judgment upon this representative of the high and mighty Ephraimites, end quote. But is this as a divine agent as Bloch implies? It may be in the realm of divine providence, but nothing in the text says so.
Providence is convenient that way. You can blame anything on providence.
Now, on verses 27 to 28, Niditch comments, as modern ethicists, we can condemn the unjust war of conquest. Even the biblical narrator, who offers no overt condemnation and seems to accept that conquest is the way of the world, repeatedly mentions that the Laitians, with way of life, in the more idyllic terms. The bitter-souled Danites are merciless, cutthroat, and self-serving. God does not condemn them, however, nor does the voice of the theologian. On one level, the story as narrated seems to say that foundation comes in violence. New nations are built on the ruins of the old. Yet a tone of wistful regret emerges in the contrast drawn by the narrator between the people, quiet and trusting, and the language of the band. The reference to the band-like war here is not infused with the tone of self-righteous justification found in the conquest accounts of Deuteronomy and Joshua. This tone in verses 27 to 29 points rather to the humanist voice suggested as a responsible for the final form of Judges, and especially for the inclusion of chapters 1 and 17 to 21.
It's so nice that they could manage to feel vaguely bad about one of their genocides. Speaks so highly.
Now, about verse 30, the son of Moses. In the Masoretic text, it is son of Manasseh, kinda. The word in the Masoretic text, the word Manasseh has a suspended nun. And Peter, can you please show the picture? So these are some of the Masoretic text manuscripts, at least the Tiberian versions. So you have the Leningrad, Aleppo, and Cairo. And you can see that in all of the versions, the nun is a bit higher or way higher than the rest of the letters. So yeah, so but
that's the second letter from the right, right?
The one that looks like a backwards L.
Yeah, where the dash is much lower in Leningrad than Aleppo or Cairo.
Yeah.
So
the line is the vowel, the na, like
na,
Manasseh.
Manasseh.
Menashe.
Oh yeah, it's spelled with it's spelled weird.
So
y'all are sounding this out and reading it, and it's just footprints and scribbles to me, so I'm embarrassed.
There are extra dots because these would have included like cantillation marks, which are like music notes.
Yeah. You can remove
like,
the
so
picture.
The Leningrad one has it, and then the Aleppo one has a different thing, which is not important.
Yeah. So while the Vaticanus, Peshitta, and Targum read Manasseh, Alexandrinus and Vulgate read Moses. According to Rava bar Rav Hanan in Talmud Batra 109b, since he acted as Manasseh, the king of Judah who was notorious for idol worship, he is linked to Manasseh. Rashi wrote that the nun is suspended out of respect for Moses. Butler comments. So Butler comments.
Oh yeah, by the way, we didn't actually explain it, right? So the Manasseh in Hebrew is 4 letters, and if you remove the nun, the one that was lifted up, you're left with
Moses.
Mem Shin Hey, which is Moshe, which is the Hebrew word of Moses. Explain.
Yeah. So, and Butler comments, the scribal tradition apparently sought to protect the Mosaic reputation from such a heretical site as Dan, especially in light of its later connection with Jeroboam's golden calves, end quote. Nelson proposed that the change may reflect a story told by Josephus in Antiquities 302 to 312 about the Manasseh who was supposedly the first priest of the Samaritan temple.
That does sound like they would be related at some point in the conversation.
Got a couple more comments to read. Matthew K. Says, Lawrence, will you post some good resource links for other religious texts in the Discord? It would be appreciated. Much love, my friend. And then,
I'll see what I can find. I can definitely pull up some Greek stuff. That'd be pretty easy. But then for other texts or other religious traditions, I'm not so sure. But
we have to get that one Mark mentioned for the.
Right, yeah. He is also in the Discord, so he can drop that. But I will find what I can and I'll drop it in there.
And then a internet user says, where do you 7 stand on Jesus's historicity or ahistoricity?
Ahistoricity.
Okay, I think he's asking if we're mythicists, and I think we could all spend a lot of time talking about this, so let's just rapid fire it.
Yeah. I think that he was a historical person. I think that he was an apocalyptic Jewish preacher.
I am unconvinced that he was a historical individual, although I do think the stories about him were influenced in some instances by possibly rumors about historical individuals.
I can't call him an historical person since no historian ever mentioned him. And on that technicality, he's not a historical person. We have a lot of stories about him, and we have way too many stories about him. And several of the stories contradict other stories, so we're obviously telling too many stories.
Gotcha. Where I stand is kind of like
I would say that I'll go for it.
Just to simply add what Lauren said. So yes to what he said, and then I would also add perhaps that he was crucified, but definitely no tomb, no empty tomb, no resurrection, no post, resurrection.
When
right, the mythical stuff, obviously I don't.
When I say like possible other historical characters, even Josephus mentions a ton of other messiahs at the time. GZI,
and a bunch of other
them.
Jesuses specifically.
Yeah,
Jesus was a common name.
It was a common name, and it was the name of Joshua, who did this conquest that we just read about a little while ago. So that's the kind of when a mother names a child, she names her hope. That's what was going on. But yeah, I'm referring to those other. I think it would have been easy for a myth to grow out of a combination of these cults of personality and the, rumor mill surrounding them, and the inability of people to verify information after the whole destruction of Jerusalem and the temple and anything, and how easy that would be to build into something that would end up on Snopes.
Yeah.
And then I went through a phase. Sorry. I went for a phase that was kind of mythicist, and I was watching a lot of GE. And I had a conversation with Chrissy Hansen about mythicism, and she really, really talked me out of it very well. And the main argument
that's exactly the conversation I had with Chrissy, because when I first started this YouTube thing, at least on this channel, the early days, I was a mythicist, and then I talked to Chrissy. So
yeah, the argument that stood out for me that I think people should think about is the whole Nazareth versus Bethlehem. Right, you've got this character who's called, he's from Nazareth, but then they have a birth story that puts him in Bethlehem to fulfill a prophecy. If the prophecy that he's from Bethlehem, then why is he from Nazareth?
I think I need to
seems
clarify
to be a historical
my
core
answer.
to it. Yeah,
it is my core. I think that if you had a TARDIS and a guide who spoke Aramaic, you would not be able to find just one person that Christians would uniformly accept as Jesus.
Oh, for sure.
I think you could find one guy upon which the most of the Jesus legend is based, but you would have to make certain concessions that, okay, well, we know that this story about Jesus is an interpolation. This story about Jesus never happened. And they already do that. Jesus historicists already admit that this story doesn't apply. This story doesn't apply. These other gospels are non-canonical. We're just going to dismiss all of those. But it occurs to me that if you could find the one guy that your handful of Christian tourists with this TARDIS would be deeply disappointed in who that guy is. And if you were to grab that guy and bring him forward in time and have him watch Passion of the Christ and Jesus Christ Superstar and things like that, I don't think he would recognize himself in those films.
Sure. Yeah. Though that part, I would definitely think that the historical Jesus would not be recognizable by, at least according to our modern conception of Jesus, like the Christian conception of Jesus.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah, I think the
minimal. Sorry,
you often say that you agree with that part, but the other part, we know that this story never happened. This other story never happened. We got all these other stories that were just like dismissed and never. You agree with that too, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we have to explain this plethora of stories. We have to explain all these traditions, and the best way to do that, they're the easiest way. It comes down to Occam's razor. Like, is just there was a historical person that all of these that myths were added onto, and So, but the thing is, I would love for you to have a conversation with Chrissy about this one.
There's also possibly
I would be open to do that. My thought on all this is that people read these stories, and they always want to imagine the kernel of truth, and it usually isn't just a kernel. They always want to imagine that almost wholesale the entire thing must have been based on fact somewhere, and very rarely is that the case.
I just want to point out that a lot of people will be like, oh, this doesn't match with a lie or a deliberate fiction. That doesn't mean it's true. We see the evolution of tales and ideas that are in no way based in reality, that are based on misunderstandings, repetitions, myths, and, maybe common phrases getting mixed up and retold and growing naturally, very naturally, into a story that people then to believe to be literally true, and it is not even slightly. And to me, that's why what Snopes does, what they did, how they started, just to debunk, stupid emails and letters going around. That
would be
so telling for how the human mind works.
I would bet that Lawrence knows the name of this term, but there was this tradition of you have a story that's, it's a famous story, but it's attributed to a person that is only known for that one story. And then you have this other character who has all of these stories attached to their name. And so in order to popularize this other story, they simply change the name of the central character to the more famous character, and now it's a more popular story.
I'm not sure if I know the term for that.
But you're aware of instances like that.
I'm aware of instances similar to that. It's usually not taken like whole cloth like that. There's usually some kind of like changes that they make aside from just the character name. But yeah, that's a much longer discussion. Just overall, I don't think we have the time.
I'd be completely open to that discussion with Chrissy and with yourself if you want to be a part of it.
I know that she's done a ton of work on this. Like, she's published on this stuff. So
she sounds like an amazing person to talk to about it, because I have some thoughts about the Bethlehem stories too. But just shoot the idea.
Well, we ought to do. Let's have Lilith on as well. Let's do a show on the historical Jesus.
Well, first I'll message Christy, see what she thinks.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd like to have that discussion. And then Trevor Wright says, is this Jesus story any different from the ancient world when comparing both the New Testament to the Tanakh and also Near Eastern belief systems?
There's definitely a lot more Greek influence.
That sounds like a simple question for a much bigger answer.
Didn't we already have this discussion about how it is unique, but it isn't, because
asking about Jesus though?
Yeah. Again, it's partially unique, but it's not in any way that makes it, something you would look at as being from outside. It's well within the realm of, bits and pieces that happened in other belief systems and ideologies, or took from what was existing. So it's not, there's nothing about it that screams, I came from another world.
Right, yeah, it's certainly much more Hellenized. I wouldn't put much in, at this point in time. I wouldn't put much in Near Eastern influence.
Also, there's a lot of weird conspiracy theories almost about how Jesus is Mithras or
right. Oh my god, yeah.
Or the Roman emperor made him up. Yeah,
or the Constantine did. That conspiracy nonsense. Even Carrier doesn't think that's true.
Yeah, even Carrier. Mythicism.
There is some serious.
Mythicism. There are such stupid ideas that have been put forward in mythicism, and I'm like, I can see certain arguments and even some stuff that Jesus never existed says. You look at the dates on that, you're like, okay, fair point. But there's some really dumb ideas in the group too. Really dumb.
Yeah. There is also that I'll just say quickly. There is also the idea that Christianity and Judaism are very different, and that is true. But there was a point, they come from a shared ancestor, and Judaism has evolved as well.
Yeah.
And certain things that Jews don't believe or don't interpret in a certain way aren't necessarily true for Second Temple Judaism. And there are things that maybe only exist in Christianity now, like you know, the belief about angels having free will, and you know, the satanic stuff, and even certain things being prophecies for a Messiah figure. Those were valid Jewish ideas, as far as I can tell. Like there were Jewish groups that would have seen it the way that Christians see it today. So it's not really fair to say like, oh, Judaism doesn't interpret it in the Christian way.
Yeah,
because...
there was a path from Judaism to you know,
Second Temple Judaism to Rabbinic Judaism.
Yeah. And we kind of, and especially when you consider the Hellenized world that they were in, like a lot of the motifs that we get in the evolution of these texts make a lot of sense.
Absolutely. I have to say, one of the things that discussing this has really made me appreciate, which I didn't fully ever appreciate, and I never appreciated it at all as a Christian, is how much Judaism has changed and how much all religions change that stick around this frickin' long. As you pointed out, Isaac, there are ideas that were Jewish, you know, 1700 years ago that are not Jewish now and would not be accepted by the majority of Jews.
And we talk about it all the time with like the henotheistic things and the
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The henotheism turning into
also
monotheism.
corporeality of Yahweh, like him having a body and you know and body parts. Like that
how
you can see it in the Bible.
Metaphorical was it always?
Yeah, it became metaphorical later.
Exactly. So we can only we have to specify which version of things we're talking about.
Is Tomer done with his commentary?
No.
There we go.
Tomer hasn't said his opinion yet.
Well, I'm not familiar with. Yeah, thank you, Peter. I'm not familiar with the New Testament text, so I can't really definitively say regarding Jesus. But
Tomer
from the No, I don't care basically, but from the conversations I've seen with Chrissy and Simone and Lawrence, I tend to go with the historical view of Jesus being real, being a real person. Regarding all the things happening in the New Testament, no, but it seems likely to be that he was more historical than mythical. Okay, so
open to the commentary.
Yes.
Yeah.
So on that same verse, until verse 30, until the time of the captivity of the land. Rashi and Kara wrote that this refers to the exile of the kingdom of Israel by Sennacherib. Amit, however, notes that this contradicts what is said in verse 31, throughout the time that the house of God stood at Shiloh. This led traditional commentators like Kimchi, Ditrani, and Abravanel to identify this captivity with the events mentioned in 1 Samuel 4-7, when Shiloh was destroyed by the Philistines. Some modern commentators like Ehrlich, Burney, and Kaufman proposed to amend Haaretz, the land, to Haaron, the ark, and thus read until the time of the captivity of the ark. Amit writes that while this interpretation does explain the disappearance of Micah's statue from Dan and prepares the background for the establishment of Jeroboam's golden calf, it has several difficulties. 1, there is no hint to an exile during Samuel's time. 2, there is no evidence for a destruction of the land that affected both Dan and Shiloh at the same time. And 3, according to Tul Sinai, the statement that Jonathan's descendants served as priests at Shiloh indicates a longer period of time between the two events. She writes that the accepted interpretation is that the day of the captivity of the land refers to the exile of the northern kingdom. This view is supported by most scholars, including Nelson and Niditch.
I mean, it doesn't explain the difference, but it could just be that, you know, the longer period of time is the family, the priestly clan, being part of the Danite tribe and serving in some form of a shrine, and then this specific image disappearing around the time that Shiloh was sacked. So it could have been related.
I'm sure they would have taken that too if they were taking the
ark.
But
he did mention that they're quite far apart, and it doesn't say anywhere that they were involved. But
No, it doesn't.
Now, on verse 31, Shiloh. That's my final comment. Fernández-Marcos notes that the mention of Shiloh is difficult since it was thought that Shiloh had been destroyed according to 1 Samuel 4. He notes that some suggested amending Shiloh as Laisha or Laish or Beshalva in peace, but there's no textual support for these emendations. Amit notes Zakovich's opinion that verse 31 is an editorial addition intended to connect the story of Judges 18 with the opening narrative of Samuel, where the house of God which stood at Shiloh being central to the story. She adds that verse 31 is a remnant of an editorial stage, where Judges 18 closed the book and then moved to Samuel. Niditch, however, notes Cross's suggestion that Shiloh and Dan were both ancient Mushite shrines. She writes, quote, perhaps the author believed that God's tenting was in Shiloh and that the altar at Dan, another holy site, was dated by reference to the more important and more famous location. And that's it for my commentary, I guess.
Okay, so are we good for, or did I read all of the, no, I didn't. Okay, I've got one more. Matthew K. says, Constantine didn't make up Jesus, that much is certain, but it's very likely that the majority of the images of Jesus originated with Constantine, particularly white Jesus. I mean, my understanding of that was that, wasn't it the Borgias that came up with the image of Jesus that
not
we still
entirely
celebrate
sure.
today?
No, the Borgias funded a lot of art that definitely promoted that image, but it's not the total origin.
Wasn't one of them the model of Jesus?
No, there's
for a lot of artworks in the Renaissance, but there are earlier depictions of Jesus with long hair and being
yeah, I think even by the
well,
I think
so
like the 4th and 5th century, like shrines have depictions of I forget the skin tone, but yeah, they have depictions of a long-haired Jesus at least.
Yeah.
It is important to make note also that some of the earliest depictions of Jesus were not of his human form, but rather there is like a sheep, a lamb, that's been found as like the centerpiece in some ancient like ruined churches, and then also the fish. So before we had a cross and a Jesus, there were either fish or lamb. As,
why
like,
is
the main
Jesus
iconography.
confusing me with dinner?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have anything to cover anything else to cover before we wait until Saturday to jump into Judges 19?
Oh, Judges 19. I'm going to read that, and I'm going to read it with passion.
And
I'll just be in the background sharpening my knives.
And I expect Lilith be infuriated with the commentary, because I expect that it'll go against what she thinks regarding the text. Just saying.
There is no version of the text that is redeemable.
So it's going to be a heated episode.
I guess.
Okay.
I really expected Lawrence to say something about a Discord server or something like that. When Art asked if you wanted to mention anything before we end the show.
Yes, of course. The Discord server. Join it. Aaron is there, technically. Let's see.
Because I don't know how to turn off the program.
Can go ahead and join the Discord. You can also subscribe to Milwaukee Atheists. I'm going to be, hopefully this summer, I'm definitely 100% going to finish that fucking video on biblical cosmology. 100 fucking percent. That is my goal. And then I have some other projects I kind of want to work on, some smaller things. They won't be so documentary style, and hopefully people can, have an attention span for that.
Squirrel.
And because
damn it, never mind.
And because Mark doesn't do it, Mark's channel's also in the chat, so subscribe to Mark's channel as well.
Thank you. Yes.
All right, and Lawrence, you are doing the biblical cosmology entirely on your own. Are we going to be doing a discussion about that after you do your video?
We can do. So I'm definitely going to be doing it on my own, but we can totally talk about it afterwards. Absolutely.
Okay. Very much looking forward to that. Because I have to ask or answer somebody's question about whether the Bible promotes a flat earth.
It does.
It does. There are a few things that if read sideways without looking at them too closely and ignoring, half of them, you could pretend was roundish.
Yeah, you can do that with a quarter too. Okay, so thank you everyone enormously. We're looking forward to resuming the show at our normal time, at noon Eastern on Saturday this coming. And I think it might also be this coming weekend, though not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow. That'll have Bryce back on, and we'll be resuming Mormon scripture, and we're going to be taking up. I think it's the Pearl of Great Price.
Oh, that'll be so much fun.
Definitely not tomorrow because.
No, you're thinking normally Sunday, which is normally
not this Sunday.
Oh wait, yeah, this is not Saturday.
No, actually, no, it's actually this Sunday. It
is this Sunday.
It would be this Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, not
all right.
Wednesday.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.